excuse the grammar, Hamas is terrorist, meaning, of course, Hamas are terrorists, when other men who ripped his sign from him in anger were not arrested. He was later released. But I'm joined now by the man who filmed his arrest, and that is political YouTuber Mahyar Tousi, who joins us now. Good morning to you, Mahyar.
Good afternoon, Julia. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, you were out covering this march. You've been covering it on your YouTube, Tousi TV station. It is extraordinary. This man, he's been arrested before. He's been on these marches before. He was standing, I mean, people who are watching will be able to see, but people may have heard of this already. This is Niyak Ghorbani. He's he's originally from Iran, living in this country. He's standing holding a sign, perfectly peaceful. He's just holding the sign up. He's not berating anybody. He's not throwing at people. He's simply holding a sign up. He's making a statement, which is, I believe, pretty accurately, the official policy of this country, which is that Hamas are a prescribed, and many other countries, a prescribed terrorist organisation. He faced quite a lot of anger in the crowd even before it was ripped off him, wasn't he?
Yes, there are two issues here. One is the second one which I'll focus on, which is the actual social media team of the Met. But the first one is actually the officers on the ground seem to be all over the place. Luckily, I was there obviously to do a live stream, report it, and I accidentally saw someone being dragged. So I thought, okay, I assume it's going to be a protester. But the problem with that was, as you already explained, he was just standing there with a sign saying Hamas are terrorists and wasn't actually starting a fight. A couple of other actual protesters decided to basically start a fight with him, and he still wasn't really defending himself. He was still being patient. The police ran in, dragged him away. But the problem with that is that the police immediately responded, and also on social media, saying, well, on the one hand, we saved him from himself because breach of peace, but also he was arrested for assault. That also means that the social media team that posted this, they didn't actually get the proper facts, because no one actually complained about him assaulting anybody else anyway. We already know all this. The problem I have is on the ground, the police officer, there were so many officers there, right there standing next to him. There are all these cameras, live cameras that they have. Somehow, they are as bad as the referees in the Premier League with VAR. They still can't see exactly what's going on. So the benefit of the doubt, they're incompetent. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what's going on with some of the officers.
That's a very, very good point. Like, you put out a very long video, and this man also tweeted out. Now, we've got a little clip of a video of asking, why had he been arrested and what he had been told why he'd been arrested, surrounded by police officers. Let's have a watch and a listen of that clip.
Sir, why have you been arrested?
Because I'm writing down Hamas is terrorist organization. That's it.
What did it say on your sign? What did it say on your sign?
Hamas is terrorist.
So he was saying that's what he'd been arrested for this, and it was extraordinary that you've got video footage, I believe, which you showed the police and put out online, where these men very angrily grabbed the sign from him. The police later, I think, screwed up the sign. He had every right to stand there with the sign. Doesn't matter if, I don't like a lot of the things that people have on their placards. It doesn't give me the right to go and rip them up. He wasn't disrupting the march. He wasn't being aggressive. He wasn't intimidating people. He had the right to be there. And by the way, the people on the march who claim to care about civilians in Gaza should also want to campaign against Hamas, because they are the biggest problem that the Palestinian people in Gaza have. But where does this leave us? Because once again, we have two-tier policing, that you can get away with shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which basically calls the eradication of Israel and the removal of every Jew from their, the now only Jewish homeland. You can shout that. That's fine, apparently. But you can't hold up a sign that says Hamas are terrorists.
Isn't it interesting, as you said, that the protesters, a lot of them who claim to be pro-civilian Palestinians, why are they so sensitive when someone says Hamas are terrorists? It's not the first time this has happened. Second issue, you mentioned the two-tier policing. It's multiple layers, and some of them go rogue. During the same live show that I did, live report on Tousi TV, there was the police line, and obviously the counter-protesters and the protesters, and we already arranged it. And I was there with a couple of other friends with press passes, and a couple of police officers stopped me from actually going through and actually reporting it. And I had to go around and deal with a couple of other police officers, and they were nice. It's like
when we say about... On what grounds did the police officer try to stop you? On what grounds?
No ground. They didn't explain anything. They also questioned me why I'm actually reporting the arrests. Why are you filming the arrests? I'm like, well, it's my job. That's this whole point. And you guys are also filming it. It's like they're afraid of the evidence. Actually, that was an interesting point because in the video that we have, the police officer, one of them actually grabs the sign and he then takes it to the van. And then at the end, the police responded saying, we don't even know about the sign. We don't know where it is. You took it.
Wow. I mean, that is quite something, isn't it? And again, thankfully, people like you are out there doing that job and filming that. And again, the police protests, everybody who is law-abiding and there to do a job should be pleased that as many people as possible are filming things from every possible angle and perspective, because that's how we get to the truth. I do just find it absolutely extraordinary this is happening. Can I ask you about, where we are on these demonstrations, though, because they've been called hate marches by the likes of Suella Braverman. And again, it's interesting to see, although she was basically, to all intents and purposes, sort of sacked, really, for saying that. I know it was a week or so later, but that's really what happened as Home Secretary. Yeah. And then we had the Prime Minister outside Downing Street a couple of weekends ago, basically, talking about how terrible these marches were, really. This week, we've got Michael Gove, the Housing and Levelling Up Secretary. He's going to be making an announcement about this new definition of extremism. We've already had 3 former Home Secretaries and various sort of anti-extremist campaigners saying, like, oh, we're very worried about this new definition. What are your concerns?
Well, the concerns I have is that we live in a country which is a centralized country in terms of central government leading things, unlike America and other places, which means that we actually need the governments of the day to actually lead. And the problem with that is that you mentioned a couple of examples. The Prime Minister coming out last week, because they probably had a political meeting in Downing Street, thought it's probably a good idea to mention the rise of, obviously, anti-Semitism and Islamism. But then clearly they also had the same meeting. Somebody else in the meeting probably mentioned, okay, you might have to mention the far right. And that creates the inconsistency. It's not necessarily that, oh, don't mention the far right or don't mention this or that. Focus on the real issue. And then you can focus on that separately as well. Same applies to the Michael Gove's the new definition of extremism. The worry that we have is that in the name of them trying to basically say we're tackling the Islamism, they might also come out, for example, to tackle me if I say something controversial on Twitter, which is still legal, but harmful apparently. So how do we, is it going to be extremist if I go on, I don't know, on Twitter and say Islamism is bad, we have to, I don't know, be radical about the Islamist migrants? That could be extremist as rhetoric, right?
Well, I mean, that would already probably count as hate speech. And we've seen these laws being brought in Scotland as well, even in your own home, things that you say. I find this very, very concerning because having been reported to a US counter-terrorism unit as a known vaccine skeptic, when I wasn't a vaccine skeptic at all, and even if I had been, I still don't see it's appropriate for the British government to give my information to a US counter-terrorism unit during lockdowns. I no longer trust the government on any of these things. I don't want governments deciding what they think is hate speech or not. I don't even know why we have to have any hate crimes at all. I think we should have you assaulted someone, threatened someone physically, called on other people, incited them to threaten. That's all we need. I don't think anything else is relevant. This is thought police stuff.
Yes, it's a thought police, but at the same time, while, as I said, we are centralized, so central government could actually have blanket policies. The other problem we have is that inside the system, whether it's the NHS or the police, you have something called the postcode lottery or just chance. So I got lucky. I had to deal with a different police officer who was nice to me. The other one was bad. Yeah. If you're lucky to live in an area with a good NHS trust, you'll be fine, but not the bad ones. It's not consistent. Even for a centralized government and blanket policies, it really depends what sort of police officer is dealing with your mean tweets, for example. Some of them might be okay with it.
That is the big concern, isn't it? Arbitrary policing and justice is not justice at all. Mahyar Tousi, a political YouTuber, really appreciate that. Thank you very much for sharing those pictures. Let's get the thoughts of commentator Sam Armstrong. This is a serious worry, isn't it? We've seen again and again, particularly with these protests, every 2 weeks since October the 7th, by people supposedly who care about Palestinian civilians, but apparently are quite happy for Hamas terrorists to still be in charge of them and use them as human shields. Never understood that bit. But again and again, we've seen people who, like someone who's, holding an Israeli flag, they'll be bundled away by the police as opposed to the people who are haranguing them. And we see it now. A man holding up a sign which is perfectly legitimate. Hamas is terrorist. Hamas are terrorists.
Yeah, I just watched that footage and there were 20 police officers dragging the guy away. I mean, good luck getting one of those 20 if your house is burgled to come along.
Yeah.
But look, right, you can get 20 police officers to arrest a peaceful protester for being assaulted. OK, well, let's see those 20 police officers spend the next week until the protests come back again and terrorise some more Jews on the streets of London. Let's see them spend this week tracking down each and every one of those violent thugs that hit him in the face.
We've got pictures of them on screen right now.
We know exactly who they are. They won't. The police don't care. They see it as their job to lower the tensions. They see it as their job as to regulate the situation.
You know what would lower the tensions if we didn't have these marches? Now, I think people's right to march, but if a march is organised by people with links to a terrorist group like Hamas, which they are, and people are not happily welcoming people with signs saying Hamas are terrorists. I'm kind of the view that the next one, all right-thinking people in the capital city should all turn up. We all just stand there with those signs saying Hamas are terrorists. If you've got a problem with that sign, you don't really care about the Palestinian people and you're supporting Hamas. I think at that point we'd know whether it was a hate march or not.
We've now reached the point where dozens of people on these marches have been arrested for terrorist offences. Yeah. Now, look, I'm an open, pretty tolerant guy, but can we just set a limit, right? Can we agree amongst ourselves that if you reach 10 people on your regular protests being arrested and in many cases convicted of committing terrorism, that we're going to say you're no longer allowed just for 6 weeks ban or something?
Maybe also the people on those marches might want to question the company they are keeping, because I know if some, if we want to march and people arrest people would certainly be telling us exactly the same. But there we are.